most people in the preservation world would say it's not worth it. But I definitely saw the beauty in it, the connection in it, and that it's the last thing that's kind of standing in this neighborhood that represents the art and the culture that kind of left this neighborhood. Really, really spoke to me.
Hello, print friends, and welcome to the 50th episode of Pine Copper Lime, the internet's #1 printmaking podcast. I'm your host, Miranda Metcalf. I release weekly podcasts with people in the print world who are doing something a bit beyond the expected. So please subscribe on your podcast listening app of choice. My dear print friends, this is a red letter episode in so many ways. I can't believe we're already at 50 episodes. It feels like only yesterday PCL was just a gleam in my eye. And I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to everyone who has supported us along the way. Family, friends, Patreon patrons, and those of you who have liked, subscribed, and shared. I am so thankful to ring in our next 50 episodes with my conversation with Maya Thomas and Chris Mulford, who joined me to talk about their project to save the Dox Thrash House. Dox was the co-inventor of the mezzotint carborundum process, the first African-American to be hired at the fine print shop of Philadelphia, and a pillar of the arts community. Dox passed away in 1965, and his house now stands vacant. Maya and Chris are looking to change this through an ambitious crowdfunding campaign to raise $100,000 to save the house. We talk about the life of Dox, the importance of historic preservation, and the role that the house will have in the community once it's been restored. PCL would also like to announce our newest, first ever, on-air sponsor, Speedball Art Products. They've been bringing you a diverse range of high-quality products for your creative practice since 1997. If you've been following along on their Instagram, and we really recommend that you do, you've no doubt seen their newest initiative in the print world, Speedball's Print Posse. Working with many of our close friends here at PCL, including Killjoy, Martin Mazzora, and John Hancock of the amazing Hancock Brothers, plus a wide range of others on our radar, they have created a brand new line of custom printing inks to push your practice even further. Head on over to the Speedball Print Posse shop at speedballart.com to find where you can pick up a new can of your new favorite color. But that is not all. Finally, to go along with today's episode, we're partnering with Speedball for a giveaway to support the Dox Thrash House. For anyone who donates $50 or more to the project, they can enter in a drawing for an incredible collection of Speedball products. You will get carborundum gel, a 4-inch brayer, an Akua printmaking plate, an Akua intaglio ink in carbon black, and the Rustler and Regulator set, which includes one of each of the 8 new Print Posse inks. To enter, just send a screenshot of your donation of 50 or more to the Dox Thrash House on their Instagram page for your chance to win. And as always, there's a link to all of this in the show notes. So, without further ado, sit back, relax, and prepare to preserve history with Maya Thomas and Chris Mulford. Hi Maya, hi Chris, how are you doing?
Hi, how are you, Miranda?
Hey, I'm doing great. Happy to be here, Miranda. Thank you for having us.
Beautiful. Well, thank you both for joining me. I know it's evening in Philadelphia right now, just as it's, morning here in Australia. But I'm excited to have you both on to talk about this project, which is to save Dox Thrash's house. I really found out about the project just through Instagram. Somebody sent me your page, and I read a little bit about what you were doing, and it just sounds like really incredible, really important work. And before we sort of dive into the project, would you mind both letting me know who you are and what your background, what your expertise is kind of in relation to the project.
Sure. So my background, I studied historic preservation in a conservation track. And originally I'm from Los Angeles and arrived to Philadelphia about 4 or 5 years ago. Participated in the studio about a particular neighborhood in Philadelphia called Sharswood, and then discovered the Dox Thrash House as one of the historic resources in that neighborhood. And then slowly it started to unfold that neighborhood was kind of like the Harlem Renaissance of Philadelphia. There used to be arts and music and speakeasies and all kinds of things up along the boulevards, and fell in love with the house. It was like the only thing left from that era, from the 1930s into the 1960s. And so within looking at that whole entire neighborhood in school, continued with this project after school, and with my current partners, Dana Rice and Chris Mulford, who's on this call, and has really been it's been enriching to kind of see it where it is now, to finally fundraising. We've had lots of up and downs on this project.
Yeah. What about you, Chris?
Well, I met, Maya and Dana through Penn as well, but I was on, the architecture design track. But my last year when I was doing my thesis, I sat next to Dana. We shared some space in our thesis lab. And that's when she was doing her thesis on the Sharswood neighborhood and how it can be more sort of self-sustaining and ground up, as like kind of a workshop, and, kind of like, started learning a lot about the neighborhood. And, through this kind of nice environment that, the university allows you, sort of kind of cross-collaborated and kind of got excited about the project. And then, after we graduated in 2016, Dana asked me to join the project, and was like, and that's when kind of came on board and had a meeting with Maya and a few other people and students that were in a program called Penn Praxis, I think maybe we mentioned. But through that, just kind of started looking at how to create a feasibility study of what could happen with the Dox Thrash House.
And so are either one of you printmakers yourselves, or have you dabbled at all in print studios hands-on?
I have dabbled. Before I came to Los Angeles, I worked as a teaching artist. Before I came to Philadelphia, I worked as a teaching artist and did some prints in California as a teaching method for high school students. And also, I'm just like a huge fan of printmaking. They're all just like the protest posters, like the way, the accessibility, the collectives that come out of it, T-shirt design, all of that kind of stuff. So, yes.
Beautiful, beautiful. What about you, Chris?
I got my first taste of printmaking in art class in 6th grade, and it was great. Mrs. Vo's 6th grade, last period of the day. One of the best project that you did all semester was, the screen printing, where you got to bring in T-shirts or whatever and just kind of go nuts. The layered technique, just like, here's, you got to come up with a sketch. You got to like really think about how much ink you're using, like if it's going to take to, kind of just gave me like a very like kind of like at an early age, I think, respect for it. And then one of my first jobs, as a kid was making blueprint copies, and it's completely different, but dyeing technique, but it's all about kind of the replication and that one-to-one time it takes to like actually copy something and create a new image. So that was kind of helped me get into the architecture world and get me to where I am today.
Yeah. You both sort of spoke about like this neighborhood in Philadelphia in general, and Maya, you said that you sort of fell in love with this house, in and of itself, even within that neighborhood. What was sort of the catalyst that made you decide, okay, I'm going to do something, we're going to get this house, we're going to make sure that it's safe? How did that decision come about to take on this like pretty large project?
Yes. So like I said, I'm from Los Angeles, and I actually lived through the Los Angeles riots in the 90s. I was living in South Central Los Angeles at the time. I was very young and impressionable at the time. my ideas of like what was going on around me and my surroundings were, I didn't really have the context to know what was really, really happening. And then as I got older and I got that context of like segregation and redlining and this disinvestment in communities, and then like the kind of rage that communities are feeling right now that are with all the unrest that are happening all over the country, I saw this as an opportunity. I saw the Sharswood house. We're looking at Sharswood because it was being faced with a kind of, the Philadelphia Housing Authority decided to kind of come in, blow up the housing projects that they had built in the 60s. And there's no grocery stores. The business corridor used to be really, really a really sound place for people and families to go. That is now not the case. There's a lot of housing. There's a lot of vacant land. There's more vacant land than there are houses in this neighborhood. And I saw the correlations between the things that I saw as a child and couldn't do anything about it, and the things that I'm seeing in this neighborhood that are having the same effects systemically with oppression and racism, and thought I could do something. And I'm getting this degree from this fancy school. I know a little something. I'm going to get out here and really save this house. And this house, most people in the preservation world would say is not worth it. But I definitely saw the beauty in it, the connection in it, and that it's the last thing that's kind of standing in this neighborhood that represents the art and the culture that kind of left this neighborhood. Really, really spoke to me.
Yeah. Why would most people say it's not worth it?
Because the house itself has kind of been sitting there empty for a very, very long time. And once that happens, you start having severe deterioration of the house and the property. And so a lot of the fabric, we use the term fabric in historic preservation, is gone or missing. And so that we also use a word called integrity. So the integrity of the historic place of the materials and stuff like that is questionable. But there's also a train of thought in preservation that kind of speaks to like the cultural aspect of it. And so when you weigh those, some people weigh the architectural integrity and the materials integrity higher than they do the cultural aspect of it. And so that's why some folks would say, if you can't save the whole thing, then, or if it's not all the way there, or if it's anything like that, it's not even worth, we should just like, put a sign up and then it'll demolish it or something like that. Right. And I, with this project, am making that argument that, especially with African-American historic sites, this is the case most of the time, or this is the case that you come along these properties and they're derelict and they're empty and they're leaning to the side a little bit, but they're still worth saving. And that's kind of like the impetus of like, I wanted to prove that point and make that point with this project.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really interested to kind of dive more into, like what the house represents and what it sort of means for the neighborhood and for the history of Philadelphia. But just to give maybe people who aren't familiar with Dox, just to back up a moment, I know that the Philadelphia Museum of Art has a website that's called Dox Thrash Revealed. And so I'll definitely put a link in the show notes to that for people who really want to do a bit of a deep dive. But could like either one of you just give a bit of an overview about Dox Thrash's life for their listeners, to give a bit more context on, why this building as it relates to the person who lived there?
I can do that. But I think Chris and I can tag team this.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. But I can start with the overview, and Chris can give like all the yummy details that I'm forgetting.
Okay.
Dox Thrash was born in Griffin, in Georgia. Grew up there, and then kind of traveled out of the South, just like most African Americans during the Great Migration period, and moved to the North, traveling and ending up in Chicago, and went to the Art Institute of Chicago there. Was a World War I veteran, a Buffalo Soldier in the West during that time as well. And then went scattered in different cities, went to New York, went to other places in the North, and landed in Philadelphia and bought this property. He had a studio across the street from the current house where his house is at 2340 Cecil B. Moore Avenue, and became a pillar of the community during that time in the 1930s and 50s, throughout the 50s. Was very instrumental in kind of training other and bringing up other print making artists in the community. Started a club for African Americans. It was a private club for people to come and kind of enjoy and relax, called the Pyramid Club, which is on Girard College, with other Philadelphia artists and photographers, and kind of just like was around the city and kind of the forefather of like all of this art and activity. So people like Dizzy Gillespie, any of those artists from the 1930s and 40s that were coming to play the Pearl Theater, I'm sure Dox would come and like be around. Like I'm imagining these things. It's
I'm getting like goosebumps imagining like all of those like incredible artistic talents in one place.
In one place. And so he kind of was Philadelphia based, and was like, when you get here, when all these artists that are around at this time, when you get here, I'll be here, and established himself here. Became collected all over the place. Like you said, the Philadelphia Museum of Art has a collection. He's world renowned, but also a little unknown. And so he started this process of in printmaking called the carborundum method of processing, and very, very much interested in kind of highlighting and looking at African Americans and doing portraiture and landscapes and highlighting our lives and highlighting the way that we lived our lives to kind of show and prove that African Americans are human beings, that they have full lives, that they laugh, that they cry. Because it was at the same time that there was so many lynchings going on at that time. It was the high rise of that. So there was like this new Negro movement that was happening to kind of like show the humanity of African American people. And so he did a lot of his artwork he created that carborundum process. It was black and white to highlight African American skin tones, and then just show the working life, the living life, and portraiture and landscape of African Americans, and became really, really well with that, and did really, really well with that.
Maya, can I just jump in real quick on like what you just said, about, kind of the everyday life. He did that not only with, high-end art technique, in his printings, but he also did that, sort of in the everyday with businesses in the neighborhood, and that would be printing the menus, or the advertisements, or like when, somebody would come through and play the jazz halls, the bills that would go up advertising that, or there would be an event, at like one of the social clubs, and the bill for the night that let all the events, would have all the businesses that sponsored the area listed in the back. So it really, he did it, was at the time seeing the whole picture and kind of running the whole gamut from some of the mundane everyday to like, the very cutting edge of, kind of a position of the neighborhood.
Yeah, I think that's incredible that he was an artist who spanned that entire breadth of what printmaking can be. And I think that's so significant. That shows how involved he was in the community, that he's making work that's ending up in museums and major collections, which is, can be really sort of outside of day-to-day life of many people, but also that he's saying like, I can make the playbill for someone who's coming to town. I can make that menu for your restaurant. That's really, really beautiful. I think that he's just using printmaking through like so many different parts of society.
And in some, in a lot of instances now, like looking at some of those everyday artifacts that, are in the museum now, some of these things are, a window into the past of the neighborhood, referencing, African-American owned businesses, and buildings that are gone now. And so they, these links of these printing becomes kind of part of the archaeology of trying to find out what was there before, in the history. And it really kind of ties it together a lot when you start to experience those sort of, mundane documents next to, some of his fine prints, thinking about, in context of the neighborhood.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like he was a very busy man. Did he also have a family? Does he have any surviving relatives at all that you all are in contact with?
He does not, unfortunately. He was, but we're I don't think he had any children or surviving. He might have had a brother or sister, and we're not in contact with them. We would love to be, though.
Yeah.
But no direct heirs or, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So if anyone's listening who knows someone or is or was related to Dox Thrash, get in contact. Great. So yeah, I'm glad that we got to like dive a little bit into Dox and learn more about his life, because it just sounds like he was an incredible pillar of that community, and an incredible force in printmaking. But as you said, a bit of a forgotten figure. You know, I'm a print historian by training, and I will admit to my shame, I did not know who he was when someone sent me a link to this. So I think that's just part of kind of the greater issues with the ways in which African American history is glossed over and forgotten and not given its due in any educational training, but I think in the arts as well. And so I think projects like this, where you're bringing attention to the physical space and saving this as a monument, and as something that by its nature, you're saying that like important things happened here, is part of what really spoke to me about this project. I would love to hear from your point of view, why do we want to save a building? You know, it's almost sort of like a philosophical question, right? But like, it's like, in your words, like, why is it significant that bricks and wood and that are just like put together in this shape, that it stands? What does that mean for the history? What does it mean for the neighborhood? And why is that so important?
So this is like definitely a philosophical question for preservationist people, but I think for a lot of people, history is like an abstract concept. It was like something that was in the past, and it doesn't affect them right now. Whatever happened then, I don't need to I'm not gonna read about it or learn about it, because it's nothing has to do with me now in 2020. And as a historian, I think that is not true. Yeah, because we keep repeating ourselves over and over again with the same mistakes. But also, I think for people who are not interested, or for anyone who's interested, to be able to embody something, to embody a historic period, embody a point in the history, embody someone that's not really, really, really known in a physical space, is a little different than reading about it in a book.
Right.
Yeah. So if you're able to go to a place and walk inside, and it's a house, and you were familiar with the house, and sometimes you have good memories and sometimes you have bad memories, and that connects back to your memories. And if your memories are solid, or if you're validated through your memories or a space or anything like that, it just makes the experience a lot more real for people. And it's also kind of transformational for people who are really taking that in and taking that space in, because if you can see it and you can hear it and you can feel it and you can taste it, that is how you create memories. And so that memory will continue on. It's passed down to generation to generation. And it doesn't become like an obscure, like maybe that's true, maybe that's not. Nobody wrote it down, so maybe it's true or maybe it's not, which is like the Western concept of how you collect history. Yeah. But to have all of those things, to have something that you can embody in and walk into and see, I think it's something that is really transformational. And that's why I think saving this house is also the last thing standing from this period of the arts and culture that was there, where right now we're dealing with a lot of violence, poverty, and stuff like that. So I think bringing that aspect back to that community is so vital. I believe in the arts just as much as I do in history. So if there's something for children to grasp onto other than the violence or whatever else they're seeing out in the streets, and there's a place that they can go to explore that, I think that will be transformational as well. And it's in their neighborhood. It's yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I have in the research that I did before this, I have a quote from Rashida Phillips, who wrote an article about...
Rashida.
Yeah, that I just feel like it just sums up and just completely echoes what you were saying, that it says, I do feel that the physical building is extremely important. The buildings that hold meaning and connection to our cultural legacy are disappearing. It speaks to the erasure that we are seeing happening, not just of our communities, but of our cultural memories. And I think that's just exactly what you were saying, is that like that the building is linked to the cultural memory and the history, and seeing that like this is a significant place. I was thinking about it just as you were talking about how, you know, when I was traveling a bit in Europe doing some research during my graduate work, I went to Nuremberg specifically to see Albrecht Dürer's house. And it wasn't, you know, even his house had been destroyed during World War II, and they'd rebuilt it, you know, I think as nearly perfectly as they could. And when you travel around Europe, you know, you see that you've got Albrecht Dürer's house and Mozart's house and, you know, all these different things. And it's such a cultural statement to say that this person was significant enough that just where they lived, they imbued this building with something that means it needs to stay. And it just doesn't get, that's just a very powerful sentiment. And I'm really, really, really glad that we've got great people undertaking this for Dox's house, for sure. So Maya, you've spoken about in the past what you've called demolition by neglect. Would you say that is something that Dox's house is going through, or sort of in danger of going through? What exactly does that mean?
So it's a term. It just basically means that it's been sitting too long. It's been sitting for too long. And so what happens, like the best way to save a house is to use it and be in it. And once those systems that are in place, it's designed to house human beings. And once there's no human beings there to take care of it, to make sure there's patches, and, you know, if there's a hole in electricity or something, there's no bugs coming in, that house becomes derelict. And it becomes a place where basically you got winters, you got hot summers, you got all kinds of things. You got grass growing over on top of the bricks, some moss, some, you know, spiders or whatever growing and coming into the house. And if that happens for too long, there's nothing you can do as far as saving the house. Some people do this on purpose. Some people do it because there's no other means for them to save the house. There's no resources for them to do that. Maybe the taxes are in arrears and it's too much of a burden for them, so they just let it go. But this concept of like demolition by neglect is basically when an owner or an entity or a city or a neighborhood is not having the resources to be able to keep up with the gems that they have. And so it's basically left to its own devices to a point where it has to be demolished.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of the neighborhood, is it are there many houses there that are also sort of under threat as well? And any other houses, I should say?
I was gonna say, like, you know, there are always, you know, more structures in danger, you know, of coming down around there. And, you know, the question in the end is like, you know, what you asked before, like, are they worth saving? And, you know, I think there's always, you know, many answers to that question. I think it kind of becomes in the end like a question of somebody's asking, like, well, why am I going to save this? You know, so there's definitely more houses that are in danger of this, you know, of coming down that are, you know, historic. And, you know, I think one of the things, you know, you kind of start to like unravel threads about some of these seemingly, you know, unknown houses actually, like, to the neighborhood, they're very significant. And if you spend any amount of time, you know, kind of, you know, learning the oral history from the neighborhood, you realize that you can, you know, make important historical references to almost any property. And the approach for that is like, you know, there's always a demand for new development. So, you know, outside of neglect, you know, there's, you know, an active entity that, you know, takes advantage of the neglect in the end. So there's always somebody like but that's somebody else's will trying to impose on the neighborhood. So in the end, the neighborhood remains vulnerable and, needs good stewards.
So once the house is saved, meaning Dox's house is saved, what are the next steps? What are the plans for the building?
That is an exciting question. So there are so many opportunities for this building. And like Chris mentioned, we did a feasibility and possibility study as our first step in kind of figuring out what's going on with this house and what are the options. We've talked to people like Rashida Phillips. We've talked to other printmakers like Philadelphia Printworks. Mm-hmm. We've talked to the Amalgam Comic Book Store. We've talked to so many people and the community itself, kind of like mining these ideas as far as what do you see here. I should note that the house is next to the library, the free library system on Cecil B. Moore Avenue, so that even makes it a bigger impact. And then also is on the end of a block. So you have the Dox Thrash House on the end of the block, then you have the library, and then you have this, like, it takes up most of the block. So to have like a cultural institution, a library on the end of a block of a major corridor, Cecil B. Moore and Ridge Avenue are major business avenues and commercial, I think would be a turning point for this neighborhood. I don't want to give up all the plans now, but once we get past this initial phase, I think it will be amazing. And I kind of want to tell now, but I can't.
Okay. We'll have to all follow along. Yeah.
You have to donate.
Gotcha. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yes.
Yeah. And so with I guess just kind of like the logistics, and when we say, save the house, obviously you said like it's not being used, and that is going to mean that it will just fall into disrepair. But can we talk just a little bit to the logistics of the actual project? So like, how much are you trying to raise? What's that money going to go to? Just like, some of the nuts and bolts of the fundraiser.
In terms of like the actual physical nuts and bolts of the house itself, right now it's survived a series of violations from licensing and inspectioning in the city of essentially being an unsafe structure. And so the current owner has gone through a stabilization process to essentially correct these violations, and has completed the stabilization. So we were very happy that happened, and now the next step is physical like construction itself to begin reusing it. And so what I mean by that is like temporary bracing and any kind of site safety stuff will need to come down. But that takes time to happen. And then, after the site is been sort of turned into an active construction site, hopefully, the building itself takes shape pretty fast.
Gotcha. So the funds will be used just to, it sounds like, preserve the house, like actually physically, so it'll be safe and functional, and you can move forward with plans for making it more of a cultural landmark for the neighborhood. Yeah, definitely. And I would say like the stabilization of the building is kind of like the physical, kind of tangible side of this, and then like sort of the, kind of the other side of, how this money will be used is, campaigns in the neighborhood and, public interaction, community engagement. And we do that with ethos of education, as well as trying to engage people to give a voice of how they think the property should be used or how it could be used. Mm-hmm. So it serves kind of both purposes in the end to support the campaign. So it sounds like there'll be an element then of sort of community engagement and asking the neighborhood, how it can sort of serve them and how it wants to fit in. Is that correct? Part of this, of how that we came together was very grassroots. Mm-hmm. This, in the beginning, this was really a side project for the university, kind of like help maintain, and kind of grew into like its own identity over the years. And so it's very bottom up, grassroots, in origin. And I think we have
as we've gone into the neighborhood and kind of interacted with the community, the need of kind of constantly like engaging this community is there to use it, because that's ultimately who it's going back to. So it can't be, kind of handed down from on top of exactly what this should be. We're kind of there to help create the framework because we believe in the possibilities of the place.
Yeah. And when you're out in the community and you're talking to people, are people who are living in the neighborhood now, how aware are they of Dox? Does he sort of loom large in the history in their mind?
Every time we're out there, we meet somebody that has had some sort of interaction, either directly with the house or by reputation of the people that have lived there. So it's always evident that how important the parcel is.
Mm-hmm. In terms of, is that case then sort of, because you're looking at raising $100,000 through this campaign that you have, that of course we'll put links to in the show notes, and that we're partnering with Speedball for a giveaway to help printmakers and other people be a little motivated, or a little thank you for their donations as well. But so is the next step after you've reached this funding goal, is it immediately going and supporting the structure of the house, or what comes next?
I think the next step for us is to partner with some community form of developer to purchase the house, and go straight to the community design process, kind of figure out what's going to happen next with this house. Like Chris mentioned, the current owner went through a stabilization process, but there is more work that needs to get done. So with our partner, as our development partner comes to fruition, that will be taking care of that. I think we're going to go into a community process and come up with a design, and then the complete build out of a building, and programming. In architecture, they call it programming as far as like what the spaces are used for, whether it's an art gallery, or if it's like an artist in residence, or if it's like a film movie house, or whatever the imagination. So that design will come forward, and then start implementing that design on that property. Beautiful.
Well, that sounds really, really exciting. And the fundraiser goes through the end of July.
Correct.
And so how can people find out more about Dox Thrash House, the work you're doing to preserve it, and how they can help? Like, where's some online resources for people?
There's so many. Once you start digging in, website is Dox Thrash, I believe, at wordpress.com. And then about our particular project, like you said, the PMA has a great website. They hosted an exhibition of all his work, maybe in the early 2000s. And so the curator there has been really helpful. He wrote a book about Dox Thrash to find out more. And then also the free library system in Philadelphia also has a collection of Dox's work. And their collection, we've been lucky enough to actually be able to see some of the original artwork around Philadelphia through these collections, and kind of see the original pieces. And I think our Instagram page at dox.thrash on Instagram.
Beautiful. Well, I will put links in the show notes to all of that. Is there anything else that you want people to know about Dox or the project kind of before we sign off today?
It's just a great effort at this time. We really, really, really want to do right by this house. Exclamation point on spaces like this. And the campaign is called the Black Futures Campaign. We love it. It's basically just like having the opportunity for a neighborhood that's kind of getting gentrified, for community members that have been there for a long time, and any new folks to kind of come in and really get in the front of what's going to happen in the neighborhood, instead of always being consulted after everything has been decided. So we're grateful for that opportunity. Everyone who's donating is making that opportunity a reality. And we just want to say thank you to everyone that's already supported the campaign. We're about, I want to say 35,000 right now. And we got some ways to go, but we're going to get there.
Yeah, I think so. Well, it's an incredible undertaking, and thank you both so much for joining me this evening. And I really hope that we can help raise awareness and help raise some funds for this. I know it's like a crazy time in the entire world right now, and I think that, you know, for a lot of people, I could see that like saving this house is tangible and it is doable and it is really good. And so I just feel like if people just kind of think about it as like, all right, this is something that I can help have some control over in this insane world, I think it's good timing for something for people to give people some hope and something to look forward to.
I also want to say the printmakers are some dope people. They have been at the forefront of this. I love them. Thank you so much. Now we just need to get the architecture and the preservation people on board. So yeah. Well, thank you. On behalf of the printmakers, I'm not super surprised to hear that they're starting to come out, because like printmakers love printmaking. And so yeah. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, beautiful. Well, thank you both again. And I will be in touch, and let's see if we can't start drumming up more excitement. And I hope everyone who hears this episode likes it and shares it and tells a friend, and, you know, just pushes more and more and more this project, because the more eyes that get on it, the more chance we have to get funds and to really see something beautiful happen. So thank you both.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Miranda.
Okay. Have a great evening. Well, that's our show for this week. Join me again next week when we get back to a classic printmaking interviewee goodness with Brian Robinson. Brian is a Torres Strait Islander printmaker who currently lives and works in Cairns, Queensland. We'll talk about his practice of interweaving images of pop culture with traditional carving motifs, how his relief prints influence his sculptural practice, and using a lino cut to create the parade track for the 2017 Commonwealth Games. You won't want to miss it. This episode, like all episodes, was written and produced by me, Miranda Metcalf, with editing help from Timothy Pauschak and music by Joshua Weber. I'll see you next week.